or his own safety and fear for Miss Taylor's safety. So, this, no matter how you look at this thing, Thin Bad and Shannon, this was just a horrible situation. Now you have a lady who is dead that had no criminal past. She was a public safety servant herself. And,
right.
And now, it's terrible. And there's no bright side to this. I think this is, again, you've heard me say this before, Thin Bad. I think this is another missed opportunity for folks to get together and talk about how they can make things better, because the community is not feeling this decision at all, and we knew that was going to happen. They are not feeling it. No matter what information is released, the way this thing was handled publicly leaves a lot to be desired. You saw that the chief of Louisville, the former chief, resigned over a lot of the fallout that happened with this thing. So, no matter how you slice it, Thin Bad and Shannon, this was a mess. It could have been handled better in 500 different ways. And yes, I am Monday morning quarterbacking this for those that say, yeah, you're not Monday. Yes, that's what I'm doing.
We all are.
Yeah. But yeah. And let me say this. For those that may think that there is a research tank that is very well respected worldwide by law enforcement agencies across the world, and it's called the Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF. And their director, and I'm a member of that agency, by the way, of that organization, and their director, a guy named Chuck Wexler, again, this guy has impeccable credentials in the law enforcement community. He put out an article a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of talked about some of the things that he said, Thin Bad. And one of the things that he said was that these incidents absolutely should be looked at in a Monday morning quarterback fashion by chiefs across the country. As they happen, the chiefs need to get together with their personnel and start talking about these things, talking about, okay, what could have been done differently? Are we doing things that may lead to this kind of situation? How could the communication with the community have been better? He listed a whole cadre of things that he thinks that chiefs across the country need to do. And Wendell, and I feel good because I was saying this weeks before that came out. And so he said that this represents another, in essence, it represents another missed opportunity for agencies across the country to take these incidents and use them as a teaching moment, instead of, just folding your arms and saying, man, people don't like me anymore. That's not the way that progress is going to be made. And I'm going to shut up now.
No, that's, it's just, and now, curfew has already begun in Louisville. They got a curfew from 9 at night to 6:30 in the morning. 72-hour curfew. I'm assuming they do that for 3 nights, but I don't, so, add this, there's just so much fuel going to this, no pun intended, to this fire, before election. I don't know how much more you can jam into 2020. And I'm not asking for any more.
No, we've had enough.
And then it's enough. But it's just, you talk about missed opportunities. But what are they? It seems like everything is there's always a justification. There's always, something that was, something that made sense. You got the no-knock warrant. You got 22 shots fired in the 22 shots fired. The dude, how many times did the guy fire? The boyfriend fire? Like once.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Thin Bad, because it's not uncommon when officers are confronted with armed subjects who are firing at them. And again, I'm just talking about that officer that hit the door and now he is facing gunfire. They are going to shoot until, number one, it takes a couple of milliseconds to process, threat, there's a problem, I need to do something. And then you react. And then there is another part of the incident where the brain now says, okay, situation is over. Now I can bring it down a notch. And so all those things happen too. And what's happening in the meantime? You've got an officer or officers whose adrenaline is going at 3,000 miles an hour and squeezing a trigger that only takes about a half a pound of pressure to make those rounds go down range. And when you put the two together, you're going to get, 5, 10, 15 rounds per officer, depending on how many shoot. And again, that doesn't negate the horror of this thing, but I'm just telling you there is a physiological reaction that happens. I used to teach tactics, and it's called condition red. And when you're in condition red, that is a serious condition for the brain and the body. And you can only stay in condition red a certain amount of time. And in condition red, a lot of things are happening. Your adrenaline's pumping. You develop tunnel vision. You develop this thing called auditory blocking. And all these things are going on as you're trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So the amount of rounds didn't surprise me under the circumstances. But again, you have to look at the flip side of this. You have a lady with no criminal past who herself is a public servant that was shot numerous times. And when you put that all together, yes, you're going to have community members that are really pissed off. I mean, that's the only way to put it.
I have a question, Mike.
Yes, ma'am.
I had someone texting asking, what was the point of charging the one police officer with shooting into the other apartment, which no one got hurt in that apartment. Am I correct?
Right. As far as I know, no one was hurt.
What was the point of them charging him with that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether he was the last person through the door and started shooting before he got in the house. It's hard to say because I don't know what they're looking at. I can only assume that during the course of this thing, either he was shooting just to be shooting, or he started shooting as soon as he heard gunfire and started shooting before he went into the location. It could be a number of things that caused the AG to do that. But it's really hard to say.
And they basically wanted to know, was that just to appease the public? Say, okay, we got somebody.
Well, let me tell you. Now, I mean, keeping it completely 100, are those considerations that probably are going through people's minds? I would venture to say absolutely. Because, let's face it, it's no secret that this situation is very emotional, and it's very important to the African American community and other communities. And that discussions were going back and forth and back, probably 3,000 times, trying to figure out, okay, is there any culpability here? Is there any criminality here? And if so, what are we going to do about it? And the other question, if not, how are we going to explain this to the community to keep the protests and the anger and the frustration down? Now, obviously, they were prepared for the frustration because, they've got the response out there. They've got the riot police out there and all those types of things. And, from a tactical perspective, that's what policemen do, and that's what police chiefs do. However, again, you can work this thing along parallel paths. There has to be some dialogue. And let me tell you why. And I'll say this to anybody on any forum. You cannot have a successful police department without community support, period. Now, and you've heard it in Thin Bad, you've heard it in Baltimore and North Carolina, and Shannon, you've heard it out here in Vegas. When these big crimes happen and these big events happen, the first thing that the law enforcement does is they offer rewards. We need the community's help. And it is the responsibility of the community, if you know of things, to help out. But if the community does not feel like they are equal partners in this endeavor, or they're not appreciated or respected, you're going to have things like you see happening, for example, in Baltimore. They're having challenges around closing cases and those types of things. And, you know, I've talked to some detectives back there that are saying that the community just won't talk to us. They won't give us information. They won't give us tips and those types of things. And we've got some big money out on the street, because when you lose that kind of trust and interaction and that collaborative spirit, this is what you are going to see. And don't be surprised if you start to see that in Louisville as they deal with other crime, because while this is going on, Thinbad and Shannon, crime is still happening. Crime is still happening in Baltimore. Crime is still happening in Detroit, Los Angeles, El Paso, Anchorage, Alaska. And so while all that's going on, people in certain communities, and I'm not just talking about African American communities, they're looking at this saying, wow, you know, this is not good. And so again, that's why I think that they should definitely be looking at working this along parallel paths. You absolutely have to maintain order and tranquility, but you also have to allow people to express their concerns. That's what America is all about. But simultaneously, you got to work at opening those lines of communication. And, you know, for police officers especially, I've been through 2 academies, and both of them were very challenging. But the one thing about it, you knew at the end of that academy, the reward was you were going to be able to get that badge, and you were going to do what officers say every day in those interviews. I'm going to get a chance to go out and serve and protect the community. And it was tedious, and nobody gave up. Nobody. And it's the same thing if you want to develop meaningful relationships in the community. It's tedious. You have to work at it. You can't quit. You can't say, well, they don't. No, you have to work at it. You have to work at it. Whether you are the informal leaders at North Avenue in Pennsylvania, or you are the district commander, you know, in Bolden Area Command, you have to work at it, because it's worth it in the long run. Anything worth having, you have to work at it. And this is something that is worth having that they're going to have to work at.
Another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Crystal wants to know, in my opinion, as a mother,
yes,
just serve. Gosh, that's a hard question.
Bring it on.
No, it's not a hard question.
Thinbad has the answer.
As a parent, no, I don't think justice was served, because I don't understand how do you defend yourself in your home.
Yeah.
And someone coming in and you don't hear them. You can't justify that to me. Police, stranger, burglar, you can't justify that to me. Right. It has to be a different way that we go about solving things, like coming to arrest someone. Like, why was it done in the middle of the night?
Well,
and moments later.
Well, I can tell you that is a sort of a standard practice among narcotics investigations to execute raids, you know, early in the morning or very late in the evening, because normally most people are asleep, and you have the element of surprise. But again, you know, this thing has been analyzed up and down the chain of command in places all across the country, which is why you saw a lot of agencies stopping the use of no-knock warrants. Now, I will tell you, there are some drug organizations, particularly when I was on the street, and you know, when crack epidemic was big, if the officers hit those doors at certain times, all hell was going to break loose. And I'm talking about grenades, gunfire, automatic weapons, and the like, because it's a very violent culture. The drug culture is. It is just about as violent a situation as you could find. If you remember
I have a question, Mike.